Let's get comfortable. A year of uncomfortable truths. 2025 was a year that forced me to face some uncomfortable truths. Not the kind you can easily post on social media or spin into a motivational lesson, but the kind that quietly rearrange your life, whether you're ready or not. These weren't sudden, dramatic revelations. They were a slow, accumulating pressure I couldn't ignore. This year didn't break me. It stripped me. And there's a difference. Instead of shattering under pressure, I felt layers peel away, leaving only what truly matters. For a long time, I've believed that being a good person meant keeping things alive, relationships, connections, familiar patterns, even when they stopped fitting. I told myself a story about loyalty and responsibility that many of you recognize. But in my mind, loyalty meant watering old relationships no matter how one sided they became. That maturity meant holding things together at all cost. And that letting go would have equated to personal failure. I suspect some of you have felt this instinct too. Staying in a situation not because it's right, but because leaving feels like disloyalty. What I finally saw, after longer than I'd like to admit, is that constantly tending to what no longer grows isn't noble at all. It's just resistance to change. And when I stopped forcing things to work, some relationships remained strong. Others quietly fell away. There was no big conflict or bad guy, just a natural separation as growth put distance between us when alignment was gone. Some relationships turned out to be like leaves on a tree. Wonderful and necessary for a season, but not meant to cling on forever as the tree stretches taller and deeper. And that isn't tragedy, and it isn't a failure. It's biology. Growth doesn't always look like addition. Sometimes it looks like shedding, like a tree letting go of old leaves to make room for new ones. As one 2025 reflection put it, growth comes with loss. You don't just shed old habits, you shed old versions of yourself. And sometimes those versions are tied to people you love. I had to learn that letting go isn't the same as not caring, and it isn't the same as not loving anymore. It's recognizing that some connections were built for who I was, not who I'm becoming. And staying small or stuck for the sake of loyalty helps no one. Staying small for the sake of love isn't love at all. Autumn leaves falling from trees symbolize the beauty of letting go. Just as trees shed what has served its season, we too sometimes must release relationships and patterns that no longer support our growth. Speaking of shedding, I realized there was another layer I'd be carrying around for a very long time. My armor. For years, I wrapped myself in a kind of persona that felt safe. If the fitness and wellness industry, and even in the corporate world, I think many of us default to a certain armor that we think gives us strength. For me, that armor was more physical, strength, size, present. It wasn't fake. It was very real, and in some rooms, it was effective. In some environments, especially early in my career, being the physically strongest person in the room, or one of the ones with the largest mass, or size, or presence, made me feel confident and earned respect. But in other rooms, it didn't matter at all. The mistake wasn't that I built that armor in the first place. Like tools, like strength can be useful. The mistake was confusing protection with identity. I started to believe that my worth was my armor, but strength, mass, title, intellect, charisma, whatever form your armor takes, it's only a tool, not your identity. When the tool begins to define you, it also limits you. It can keep you from growing into spaces where that armor isn't what's needed. Some of you learned this the hard way in 2025. Maybe the skill or trait that used to give you confidence suddenly stopped working in a new role or a tougher room. I certainly hit moments where the old tricks didn't translate to the challenges in front of me. This year, 2025, reminded me the real confidence doesn't come from how others perceive you when you walk into the room. Real confidence comes from what you're willing to lose in order to stay aligned with yourself. It's not about the image you project, but the principles you refuse to compromise on. Character isn't built by what you hold on to. It's built by what you refuse to trade away. Leadership research backs this up. The greatest barrier to courageous, daring leadership isn't actually fear or lack of skill. It's the armor we use to shield ourselves when we're afraid. We cling to a protective persona, be it a physical facade, a professional title, or an old way of doing things, because it once kept us safe. But if we're not careful, that same armor can trap us. It can become a cage that keeps us from adapting and connecting. Sometimes we have to risk taking that armor off to find out who we really are without it. In my case, I'm learning to set aside the need to always be the strongest or the toughest or the largest or the most charismatic in that room. Instead, I'm focusing on being the most authentic, bringing my values and vision, even if it makes me feel exposed. That kind of vulnerability is scary. Man, it's scary. But it's also where genuine leadership lives. Another uncomfortable truth that hit me this year is just how much of our world runs on subtle agreements to maintain control. I'm not talking about cartoon villains or wild conspiracies manipulating everything. I'm talking about the everyday ways we all participate in keeping things normal and unchallenged. It's that unspoken narrative that it's better not to poke too deeply into the things that don't seem right because it's easier or more profitable or more socially acceptable. It's easier just to let them all slide. I started noticing how incentives and fear often quietly shape decisions. Organizations reward those who don't rock the boat. Leaders who ask tough questions or challenge the status quo sometimes get sidelined or gently pressured to fall back in line. The system usually isn't overtly hostile to change. It's efficiently hostile. It rewards compliance and quietly punishes disruption. I'm going to say that again. It quietly punishes disruption. It prefers a comfortable lie over an uncomfortable truth. And once you see this dynamic clearly, you can't unsee it. If this year felt louder, if this year felt more polarized, more exhausting, yet somehow less real to you, you're not alone. And you're not imagining it. It's the dissonance of witnessing how a culture can prioritize keeping the peace over seeking the hard truth. And here's the isolating part. I don't blame people for clinging to what's comfortable. Comfort is expensive to lose, and certainty is expensive to question. Most people aren't weak or ignorant. They're often protecting something, a sense of security, a livelihood, a community's acceptance. They don't yet see how they could replace what comfort provides. So they'd rather not look behind that curtain. But here's the problem. Once you see it, you can't pretend you don't. You start living at a layer of awareness that can feel a step removed from those around you, like you're having deeper conversations in a world that mostly chats about surface level things. It can feel lonely in a subtle way. Not lonely as in lack of friends, but lonely as in different, awake in a world that prefers to dream. I came across a leadership piece that described this perfectly. Comfort doesn't announce itself as fear, it shows up as reasonableness. In other words, the culture of comfort often disguises itself. We rationalize staying on the safe path by saying we're being practical or responsible. We convince ourselves we're just choosing our battles or keeping the peace, when deep down, it's simply fear of change. Leaders tell themselves things like, I don't want to damage the relationship, or this isn't the right time to speak up. Those explanations feel sensible and kind, but they can slowly erode what really matters. When leaders avoid tension, teams learn that honesty is risky. When harmony is valued over truth, eventually challenge disappears and compliance takes its place. From the outside, everything looks polite and stable, but from the inside, it's stagnant, even toxic. I recognize that pattern in some industries I work with and in moments of my own leadership. It was a wake up call that maintaining the comfort of how things are can quietly undermine the growth of what things could be. Seeing all this, I had a few moments this year where the temptation to return to that comfort was very real and personal for me and my family. One particular moment stands out. An opportunity came that would have been the safe choice. I could take a stable corporate role, get the solid paycheck and health insurance that my family needs, and finally exhale after some uncertainty. It was so simple and practical on the surface. Just take the job, Adam. Stabilize. Stop fighting. Stop pushing. On hard days, that option glowed like an exit sign from stress. And I want to be completely honest about this. That temptation to settle wasn't driven by greed, nor by laziness. It was fear. Fear disguised as responsibility. When people depend on you, fear seldom announces itself plainly. It doesn't say, I'm fear, here to hold you back. No, it wears the mask of reasonableness. It whispers in your ear, you're being responsible. You're doing the mature thing. After all, who could fault someone for securing their family's well-being? But I had to confront what was really happening under that reasonable guise. Taking that path would have meant trading away something core to me. I knew exactly what I'd be giving up if I took the comfortable road. And it wasn't money, it wasn't status, it wasn't title. I would have been trading away purpose-driven meaning. I'd be sacrificing the alignment with my true goals, my true values, in exchange for safety. The leadership article I mentioned earlier warned that every time we choose comfort over clarity, we quietly spend our credibility and our integrity. In my case, it would be a self-betrayal. No one else might see it, but I would know. So I couldn't do it. I stepped away from that tempting safety net, and as hard as it was, and I know some of you made the opposite choice this year, and I'm not judging because I understand why. Sometimes taking the stable job or staying in the familiar role feels like the only sane choice when life gets chaotic. It does feel responsible, but if you did that not because it was truly right for you, but because it felt safer, you might be carrying a quiet heaviness too. You might already be sensing the cost of that decision, maybe in the form of a nagging dissatisfaction or a feeling that a piece of you is left unexpressed. Just know you're not alone. We all weigh these trade offs, and sometimes we choose comfort, and sometimes we learn from it. The point isn't to never choose safety, it's to be conscious of what we're trading when we do, and to make damn sure we don't give up the truly irreplaceable things out of fear. This year, in 2025, all of these realizations led me to a line in the sand. Well, a few actually. Here's what I'm no longer willing to pretend going forward. Comfort is the same as alignment. I'm no longer pretending they're the same because they're not. Easy doesn't equal true. I'm no longer willing to pretend that keeping the peace is the same as being at peace. I'm not going to confuse avoiding conflict with actual inner peace. Not anymore. I'm no longer willing to pretend loyalty to people, to places, or systems that no longer fit is some virtue. I mean, loyalty is admirable, but not when it means betraying yourself. And I'm no longer willing to pretend that I don't see what I see. I'm not going to gaslight myself about the truths that have become abundantly clear, even if they're inconvenient. I tried for a while to ignore or downplay the clarity I was gaining, to unsee the misalignments in my life and work and the world around me. Trust me. Oh, man, trust me. I wanted to unsee it. It would have been more convenient to slip back into the familiar groove. I can't. I just can't. I've seen too much of what's real and what isn't. So I'm done apologizing for having this clarity, even if it costs me familiarity, relationships, or certainty. I will not abandon what I now understand to be true. And let me be real. Some days, clarity doesn't feel like a triumphant breakthrough. It feels heavy. Heavy. I mean, it sits on my shoulders with the weight of all the decisions it demands, choosing what's right for you, stepping away from a misaligned corporate partnership or deal or boss, saying no to a lucrative deal that violates your values, speaking up about the elephant in the room at work. Those things can feel burdened. There's loss and discomfort wrapped up in doing what's right. Pretending otherwise, acting like it's all easy and empowering all the time would just be another lie. And I'm done with lies, especially the ones I'd tell myself to make life seem easier. Character I've learned is built in those heavy moments when you refuse to trade away your truth for a bit of short-term comfort. If you've been listening to this and feeling a quiet sense of recognition, not rah-rah excitement, not sudden motivation, but that subtle nodding of the soul that says, yeah, man. Yeah, I felt that. I feel this. Then this message is especially for you. Maybe there's been a voice in your head or a feeling in your gut saying something about the way we're living, the way I'm living doesn't add up. And maybe you've tried to ignore it. Maybe you've tried to rationalize it or bury it under being busy and responsible. Maybe you've chalked it up to just being tired or stressed. I want to tell you something. You're not broken. You're not too dramatic or imagining things. And you are definitely not alone. In fact, I believe there's a growing community of people in leadership, in wellness, in tech, everywhere, in every walk of life, who just aren't willing to lie to themselves anymore. Some might call it, in fact, a lot of people want to call it finding your tribe, though I'm not fond of that word. I think of it more simply as finding others who value truth over comfort, who value purpose over pretense. And if you've been carrying these realizations quietly, wondering if you're crazy or seeing the world differently, take heart. You might just be a little bit early to the shift that many others haven't arrived at yet. Not early because you're smarter or better, but because you were willing to pay the cost that comes with waking up. Being awake, truly awake, to what feels misaligned or false in our worker society, it has a cost. The cost might be discomfort, loneliness, or the loss of old identities. Not everyone is ready to pay that yet. You were. That doesn't make you superior, though. It just means you've stepped into the next room while others are still in the last room. In time, they may join you, or they may not. But your willingness to face truth now means you're forging a path others will walk later. Trust me. And as you stand there, occasionally second guessing if you should just go back to the way things were, remember that those of us out here with you, we're navigating the same strange terrain. We may be fewer in numbers, but we're out here and we understand. You are not alone. I'm Adam Howland. This is NONFiltered. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Here's to ending 2025 with our eyes open and our hearts aligned. Wherever you are in this journey, leading a team through uncertain changes, building something new in wellness or tech, or simply working on yourself, know this. Let's step into 2026 wide awake, unapologetically clear, and more deeply connected in ways that truly matter.